What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Yours Truly podcast. Today, I have Neil Daedalus with me here in the Yours Truly virtual studio. Neil and I started playing in this corner of the internet around the same time, a little over a year and a half ago. And Neil and I have a lot in common. We're the same age. We grew up interested in similar things, and we've in and out of the corner, different streams. Played very diligently. He hangs out a lot on Chad's channel, the Friday Morning Nameless, and has kind of been a co-operator there, a partner in crime with Chad, doing some of his own projects on that channel and hosting different conversations. And so this couple weeks ago at Midwest Estuary, Neil was my Estuary group leader, and we haven't had like a one-on-one conversation, and I thought this would be a great time to do a follow-up and have a one-on-one conversation with him about this corner of the internet, Jordan Peterson phenomenon, maybe Carl Jung, and just kind of his take on the conference. And so I look forward to getting to connect with Neil here on Yours Truly and practice some conversation crap today. Don't forget, like and subscribe, become a channel member if you want to help support this channel and its work. So without any further delay, I give you Neil Daedalus. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. Yeah, we were just kind of discussing, like I said in the intro, we came in the corner, similar time. I think that's a great way to start even. Like I said, I don't think you did an official PVK rando. I really kind of didn't, I did like a 15-minute, it's just kind of was this season that we came into the corner, and you were thinking about talking about that. So I think that's a great place to start, whatever you were kind of considering related to that.
Yeah. No, thanks for inviting me, Christian. And because we've been circling each other for about 2 years now.
Yeah,
just being aware of each other, but then we got to see each other in person at Midwestuary, and that was great. And
I mentioned you are my Estuary group leader.
Yeah, I did okay. I messed up a few times, but I did okay. I tried to get Jordan Hall to talk about Scenius, but he didn't take the bait.
Nice.
So he was more interested in the story of the couple that was with us, and I don't blame him. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we came into the corner. I don't know. It was about a little over a year and a half ago, close to 2 years, like you're saying. Yeah. And you had been kind of paying attention to the corner. I kind of didn't know the sublayer kind of existed, and you kind of for a little while been paying attention to that.
Yeah, I think we had similar paths in that I think both of us really got inspired by Jordan Peterson, especially with the Genesis series in 2017. Like the Genesis series completely, and I didn't even realize this at the time, but something I've said repeatedly in the corner, but I stand by it, is I think of Peterson as my John the Baptist.
Yeah.
In that he wasn't the Lord, he wasn't the thing that brought God, but he is the thing that prepared the way and made straight the paths of the Lord. It's this concept of grace that seems so foreign to materialist atheist types, or even anyone who's determined to orchestrate their own destiny. Anyone who's determined to, like, I'm going to build this or create this or do that. And that concept of grace was such a foreign concept to me at that time, because in Peterson's words, like, it's your best bet. Whatever you're going through, like doing these things, it's your best bet. And I believe that. I did believe that, and you could say I almost had I never fully deconstructed, because I never went full atheist. And I think it had something to do with the fact that I always had a really good relationship with my own father. And and this actually ties into Carl Jung stuff, which we could talk about later. But when I look at most atheists, the correlating factor is usually the relationship with their own father more than anything else. Like they could say that they got to it via some top-down analysis of all the details, But what it really comes down to is a willingness to, yeah, it goes back to grace, a willingness to subordinate one's own will and what one thinks is right to some higher authority. And almost always that's the father in a family. It could be another male role model. It could be grandfather or something like that. But it's a willingness to subordinate oneself to that and trust. And I think because of that, I never fully deconstructed, because the universe and the way things worked, it just seemed a little too perfect all around to say, oh, this is all random chance. And I feel similar about, yeah, go ahead.
And indifference, random chance and indifference. That was kind
Correct.
of fun.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had this, I would call myself agnostic. And I think of it now as almost like a false humility and the false humility is something like who I am in my beliefs is just a product of the random chance of where I was born and the family I was born into. And if that's the case, then what makes me so sure that my beliefs are any more right than anybody else's? So in some ways it is a true humility, but it is sort of a abstracted view from above, saying like, well, I can see the whole landscape in the game and I'm actually not part of the game. And that's illusory, because what Peterson taught me is that no matter what, you're part of the game. Like what's fundamental about the human condition is like, you have to make choices. You have to choose. Like even not choosing is a choice. And so that was something that really set the stage for grace, for an event that, and your experience of Abraham and the dagger, and that that stuck with me, because I didn't have exactly that experience, but it was a similar intensity, I would say, to the experience that I had. And yeah,
and I was just going to say, I mean, I don't know how to even bring this up, and it doesn't have to be, you can kind of go around this, but I mean, you experienced tragic loss in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the intensity that we're talking about.
Yeah. So I defined myself based on my career, my competence, you could say, my ability to accomplish my goals. And that's been my history throughout my life, is I can sort of get away with things, get away with doing what I want and accomplish my goals, and get away scot-free. Like I can dabble in drugs without becoming an addict, and I can party hard and still get the A's and B's, and I can, like throughout my life, it's just, there's people that I've been with that have fallen in either the pit of alcoholism or drug abuse or some other thing, and I've always seemed to get away scot-free. And that changed in 2016, 2017. And I won't go into elaborate detail on that, but for the first time in my life, I was in a situation where it was outside of my control to fix. Like and I basically, I could either just run away completely, or I could just make the necessary sacrifices. And Peterson was a godsend in that moment. And during my roughest time and my most difficult troubles of my life, then in November of 2017. So, okay, something about my family is I come from a kind of interesting family, in that I was raised Presbyterian. I was raised mainline Christian. Fell away. I was already somewhat deconstructing before 9/11, but 9/11 was the nail in the coffin for me, because I grew up in New Jersey. I knew plenty of people who were affected by 9/11, maybe not directly, but somewhat indirectly. Like there were kids in my high school who lost parents in 9/11.
Wow.
And I remember the conventional wisdom at the time, like what the adults were saying is like, they're crazy, and they were cowards, like those two things. And I knew they weren't crazy, because I knew they genuinely believed what, and I knew they weren't cowards because they were willing to die for their beliefs. That's not a cowardly act. So if the conventional wisdom was fundamentally misunderstanding that opened the door for Sam Harris in The End of Faith, which I read a couple years later. But it was that question again of like, what makes me so sure that my beliefs are any better or different than theirs? And because their beliefs were just a product of the country they grew up in, the influences they have, and it took agency, completely out of the equation. But anyway, so I had already deconstructed, and I had met my wife, who's a cradle Catholic, traveling for work in New Orleans. And one thing I learned from my wife is that she never, like not even remotely, not even like soft power, like put pressure on me to convert or change. And for her, it was just, hey, my faith's important to me. It was there in moments of darkness when I really needed it. And, she would go to church on Sunday, and I wouldn't, and that was fine. And the expectation was like I would go to church on like Christmas and New Year's, or not New Year's, Easter, and the big events, and I would just I got used to going up and for the Eucharist and going like this and getting the blessing. Yeah. And she wanted our children to be raised Catholic, and I was fine with that because I had a good Christian upbringing. I saw no issue with that, and then they could make decisions the same way I did. So anyway, we get to November of 2017, where basically, the identity crisis, or like the who am I, the meaning crisis, like that was me in a nutshell, because I had moved for work. I moved from work post meeting my wife and getting married and moving down to New Orleans, where we had our daughter, and I was no longer climbing the corporate ladder. I could not define my identity through my work anymore. Didn't have any friends in the area. My relationship changed for the worse, and there were a number of factors that went into that, but it was not good. And so I'm more alone and isolated. I don't have identity. If I was 15 years younger or something like that, maybe anorexia, bulimia, maybe trans crisis, maybe something else. But where I was listening to Sam Harris basically every podcast. And then, do you remember the Sam Harris Jordan Peterson conversation? Do you remember that?
Oh man, that's like seminal for me because of their conversation about hell. I mean, that to me is like that moment, like, when does hell start? And he's like, I mean, and that was, he made that contrast between, people called it, he pulled religion out of the magic hat, or the I can't remember how they said it. I think this is what you're talking about, but the Pangburn conversations, I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Well, that was significant too. But the very first one I listened to, where they encountered each other the first time, was this podcast called "What Is Truth." Oh, that's what Sam Harris labeled it, and it was like 1 or 2 weeks after.
Yeah, they couldn't talk, basically.
Yeah, and I remember Peterson made points like, well, if the truth of the fusion bomb leads to nuclear holocaust and we're all dead, then it wasn't sufficiently true. It was that kind of argumentation. And every time Peterson spoke, I was like, no, he's talking about wisdom. That's not truth, that's wisdom. And then after that, I thought it was the dumbest conversation between two people that I had ever, or two smart people that I'd ever listened to. And then I listened to Peterson on Joe Rogan, and that hooked me something fierce. And then I think it was like maybe May, he started on, it was like March to May 2017, he started the Genesis series. And I was just eating that up. I not a more potent or powerful YouTube series that I had experienced before or since. And then we get to November of 2017, early November, and sorry, I'm meandering all over here.
Right. But cool.
So both of my parents were married before they were married to each other. And my father has a son from his previous marriage. And he's 10 years my senior. And so my brother, Bill, he absolutely brilliant, like mathematically. My father has a master's in physics, computer programmer. My brother was better at math than my father was. He was second in the state of New Jersey at the Math Olympiad, considered getting a PhD in math. He, for a period of time, he was the lead programmer of a company called Vonage, which was the first company to do voice over internet when that was a brand new thing.
And here we are.
Yeah, here we are. Exactly.
Mm.
Man, symbolism happens.
Right.
But the thing about my brother is that he was always convinced he was the smartest person in the room, probably because he was. And he didn't make a lot of friends. He burned a lot of bridges. And at the time, I knew he wasn't doing well. Like, I knew he was living alone, chain smoking, drinking. I didn't know the full story, but I knew he wasn't doing well. And I hadn't talked to him in, I think it had been 3 years before my wedding, or at least 2 years. And I hadn't talked to him. I had my own problems. I'm like, I didn't know him all that well. I only got to see him every other weekend when I was growing up, and only for 7 years, because then he went off to college, and it's just not my problem. And then my mother texts me, my mother, who's not related to my brother. I get back from a business trip. I'm at New Orleans airport. My mother texts me, Bill is dead. And what went through my mind at that moment, and it kept ringing through my mind for the days and weeks, was Cain saying to God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Because that from Peterson's series was like very, very much resonant in me. And I think everything from my theology to like worldview almost stems from that Cain and Abel story in a lot of things. But I remember, I'll go into some vivid detail. This has only happened to me twice in my life, but if you're ever you live long enough, I think everyone's under periods of duress, like extreme stress. Yep. And it's only happened to me twice in my life where I've been under this level of extreme stress. But what happens to me when I'm under, I find out what how my body, this gets back to Jung and the unconscious, because like this is all the stuff that like we have no control over. But the way my physical body responds under extreme duress is like, I have to go number 2, like diarrhea, like I like just over and over and over.
Hence the graphic.
And yeah. And so I'm like driving home from the airport and like pouring sweat, like I'm just holding it in. And I get home and I rush into the bathroom, plop onto the toilet, and gushing filth comes out of me. And my father, and at that moment, like my father calls me, and I answer the phone on the toilet, where my father has to tell me that his firstborn son is dead. And I'm like sitting in my own stench then. And it's like, yeah, like I'm not going to forget that. Okay. So that's early November. Fast forward 2 weeks. I think it's like the weekend before Thanksgiving, November of 2017. And my wife and I and our daughter, we have to attend a wedding of one of her friends from Notre Dame. She went to Notre Dame in Indiana. And we go to this wedding in Texas at a Catholic church, Catholic wedding. And it's not like it's like a nice community church. Maybe could see, it's big, but it's not like a cathedral or anything like that. So I want to be clear that it's not like,
the majesty. Yeah. Like
yeah. I mean, it's a very nice church, but it's not, it's more modern in its setup. And anyway, so we're sitting at the mass, and I'm, it's 2 weeks after this, and I'm pretty much at my low point. I don't know who I am, where I'm going, what I'm doing. And at some point during the mass, and I don't know if it was like 10 minutes before the Eucharist. I don't know if it was like 30 minutes. I don't know. But at some point during the mass, like I turned to my left where my wife's sitting, and our daughter is asleep on her shoulder, like perfectly asleep and perfectly beautiful. And in that moment, like everything is perfect. Like it's hard to describe, but like my perfectly beautiful wife with our perfectly beautiful daughter in this perfectly beautiful church at the perfectly beautiful wedding in the perfectly beautiful mass. And everything in that moment is like perfect. Like one moment of perfection. Maybe the rest of everything else is not perfect, but like that one moment, perfect. And in that moment, I have this feeling come over me. And the feeling did not say anything. I wrote this down shortly thereafter because I'm like, I have to remember this. And the way I remember this feeling is it's kind of like when you're listening to your favorite music of all time, and you get to your favorite experience of that music, and you get to the crescendo, the perfect moment of that music, and every hair on your body is standing on end. And Peterson calls this a piloerection.
Yeah,
It's just a very funny word.
That's the technical
AWE.
biological. Yeah.
Yeah. Aw. But it was that's the closest equivalent, except the feeling held. Like the feeling was constant. The feeling just sat there. It was steady. It didn't say anything, but if anything, what it was a director of attention, because it basically said, like, this is it, Neil. Like, if you care about anything in your life, anything at all, like, you pay attention right now. Like, this is it right here. And so, my wife is completely oblivious to what I'm subjectively going through in that moment, and so I'm present. I'm paying. Neil, present. And so I am completely focused on the mass in that moment. And it was the feeling was loving, but it was also tough. Like I was left with a feeling that like I better take this seriously or else. Like it was clear to me that this is hard to relate to, because it's kind of like it was clear to me that if I did not listen to this feeling, that it would not be good, whatever that result would be. And so, but I'm just in the moment. I'm taking it in. I'm focused. And so we get up to the Eucharist, and we're walking up, and I'm used to doing this every single time. And I see Christ on the cross, and the crucifix that's hanging over the altar. And for the first time in my life, I want to partake. I actually want to, but I know the rules, and I know what I am supposed to do. And I get up in front of the priest, and I cross my arms. He blesses me, and I turn to the side. And the moment I turn, the feeling leaves me, except because I think if this next part didn't happen, I might have just been able to dismiss it as like an extreme psychological event following duress.
Yeah.
But then this next thing happens, and I think that was like the kicker. I think that was the thing that kind of, and that gets to my theory of God, which I'll probably go into next if you'll let me.
Yeah, dude, I'm right with you. My attention is here, Neil.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I turn, and the feeling leaves me. Except when I was a teenager, my favorite show, I was sci-fi nerd, very much a sci-fi nerd, much more nerd than geek, which is like the Star Trek over the Star Wars. Because I loved science, man. Like my religion was science, and so yeah. So geek, I would say, is like space fantasy, whereas nerd is like, we're gonna turn our the science fiction into reality, sort of thing.
So I'm on the geek side then.
That's okay.
I'm more into the space fantasy. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so my favorite show is a show called Babylon 5. And I want more people in the corner to actually watch this show, because there's a specific role, a specific type of character called the Rangers that I think is the role that TLC is playing right now relative to Christianity and the popular culture and all of that. And so I very much want people to watch. It's an excellent show.
I want to pause on that. I know you're about to get to this kind of climax point of your story, but Rigel Thurston just wrote about the gargoyles, kind of this gargoyle spirit, and that's kind of a similar idea, I think, if what I'm hearing is correctly. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, in a lot of ways. So the Rangers in Babylon 5, they are the eyes and ears of the good. Like, they are in the field, watching the signs, seeing the spirits, feeling the spirits, taking the pulse of what's going on and reporting back. And not only that, the as in this show Babylon 5. So one thing to know about Babylon 5 is like it's the first space opera. So the thing that we take for granted for a show like Game of Thrones, where you have to watch each episode before for it to make sense so that was not a thing until Babylon 5. Every Star Trek episode used to be a standalone. Maybe they would do a two-parter or something like that. And then Babylon 5 is Straczynski, who was raised Catholic, by the way, deconstructed atheist, but his Catholicism is all over Babylon 5. It's amazing. Like it's that Tom Holland-esque, like you can take the man out of Catholicism, but you can't take the Christianity out of the
Sure.
man. Sort of and so he could say one thing, but what his art is showing is something completely different. But anyway, so in that show, he's got a 4-season arc of not every episode is like many episodes, especially in the beginning, are standalone, but he builds up to this like crescendo. And Babylon 5 was being aired in the late 90s at the same time as Deep Space Nine. Because Babylon 5 was so successful in this like building arc, Deep Space Nine had to copy that, and they went from like single standalone episodes for Star Trek to like this giant space war, and clearly trying to compete with Babylon 5. And Straczynski did it on like a shoestring budget with like he was an underdog. Like I love the show anyway, and it's been remastered. It's 1080p now, so it's actually like reasonably but it's tough to get into because the first season is pretty slow. It's old school, like 45-minute 22 episodes. Like, yeah. So it's a true sacrifice, but you got it. Yeah.
Neil, what happened in your story?
I want TLC people to like get into this show. Okay. Well, that's something about me. Is like I care, like I genuinely care about TLC. Anyway,
I believe that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's this scene in the show. This is a very random scene. So in this particular episode, Earth is under lockdown, and the main character is captain on a space station. He's commanding like this giant space war, and it's not going well. The space war is going terribly, and Earth is doing poorly. And ironically, the only way they can get messages out of Earth is they have these religious leaders. Like they have an imam, they have a rabbi, they have a Baptist pastor, actually, like a black Southern Baptist pastor, and they smuggle messages out like in a Bible. Like they have a USB basically like in a Bible, and they get the messages out from Earth to the space station. And at one point in that particular show, and this is the scene I'm talking about, the pastor is talking to the captain, and they're just kind of talking about what's going on in their lives. And the captain like basically does this snarky, sarcastic comment to the pastor, and he's like, "Oh, so now you're just going to say I need to turn over all my problems to God now, aren't you?" And in this scene, the pastor leans in, and he's like, "When God comes calling, you're not going to need me or anybody else to tell you what that sound is." Okay, so that scene, the moment I turn away from the Eucharist, from the moment I turn away in that Catholic church, that scene burns in my head. It's not like a flitting, it's not like a fantasy. It's like searing, and it's like the most intense memory level burning. And so I'm walking back to my pew going like, what the fuck?
Yep.
Like in my head, I'm because if you told me that morning that such an experience was possible without DMT, psychedelic drugs, whatever, I would have said, no, it's like, that's not how reality works. And that was a frame breaker that just blew apart all. So when I say frame breaker, people, it's my frame is the way I think about the world. It's my axioms, maybe implicit. I don't even realize the things that I think about the world, but the world works in this way. And then when something happens that is outside of that you cannot deny the reality of that experience, then who am I, and what is real and what is truth?
For me, it felt like things melted, like those axioms, whatever, like even biblical axioms, in that moment you referenced earlier, so much of that felt like those things kind of just melted away very, very quickly in that moment.
Yeah. So I think I got back to my pew, and I turned to my wife, and I'm like, I think I just had a religious experience. And she just kind of shrugs and she's like, great. Like, she's like, she doesn't know what to make of that. And then, okay, so this is the way I thought back then. And honestly, this is still kind of how I think, but because I was thinking about it for a few days, not doing anything hasty. And I said, okay, at the very least, I just experienced a profound psychological event. Like, and so my saint is actually Doubting Thomas. I chose Doubting Thomas. But I give myself a lot of credit in that moment because at least you know, the parable of the sower. I see a lot, you know, the seeds that sprout up quickly. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen for me, you know, that sprout up quickly and then they burn up in the sun. And
Right.
but the what I decided to do at that point was I said, okay, I need to go back and I need to reread everything that that had discouraged me from continuing to be a Christian. You know, I need to go back and basically I need to see how that stuff hits me now. And so I reread The End of Faith. There was this by Sam Harris. There's a series on YouTube, very early series by this guy called Evidence, with like a 3 written backward, excellent made evident series, where he was like a fundamentalist evangelical type. And, you know, he had questions about there's no historical evidence of the Exodus and the 3 sources, the Q source, and all, you know, all this stuff
and everything.
yeah. And he did an excellent deconstruction of all that. And I went rewatched that and I said, you know what, all these criticisms of Christianity, they don't hit the bullseye. You know, they always go after the Old Testament, and no. What I need is the best moral arguments against Christ, not even historical, because the historical consensus is that this guy existed. So I'm like, no. I need the reasons why this guy who existed was not the Son of God. That's what I need. Bear with me 1 second. So
what we got?
So I found this book. So I did some searching. I found this book. It's called
The Bad Jesus.
Yeah, The Bad Jesus by Hector Avalos, who's a notable biblical scholar. And so I bought this book and I was like, this is perfect. This is what I need. And I was terrified to read this book. I was so scared because I had this like nascent baby faith, like this tiny mustard seed. And so finally I pick up the book and I read the first chapter and I'm like, eh. And I read the second chapter and I'm like, eh. And I read the third chapter and I'm like, nah. And every chapter that I read, I just, that little faith like grew a little bit more and more and more. It just wasn't landing. And then and right around that time, there was my wife's aunt and uncle live in Texas. They kind of heard about my, you know, interest, and they invited me on this retreat in May of 2018. It's called ACTS, ACTS. I think it's only big in Catholics in the southern United States. I don't know if it's in other parts of the country yet, but and I went on this retreat, and it was like absolutely the right thing at the right place at the right time, and it just confirmed that that you know that I was meant to do this, and I started what was called a RCIA. It's now OCIA, but Rite of Catholic Initiation in Adults, and I started that in September of 2018. Was entered into the church on Easter of 2019, which was providential too, because the following Easter was canceled. If you remember that. And now another interesting tidbit about my story. I have a brother 10 years my junior. And my brother 10 years my junior entered into the Catholic Church in college. So he entered into the Catholic Church 2 or 3 years before I did. And so he was, and I supported him in that. And I thought it was great, even though I wasn't, you know, I was still a non-theist or whatever. But he was my sponsor entering into the, so he flew down to New Orleans. He's still in New Jersey. He flew down to New Orleans, and he was my younger brother was like the Joseph to his brothers, you know, it's like my sponsor. And the death of our older brother, you know, I took to heart what Peterson talked about, which is like, you could be the guy at your father's funeral or your brother's funeral. Yeah. That tears the family apart, or you could be the guy and that helps stitch it together. And after that, my younger brother and I, who's 10 years younger than me, like he and I never talked really because he was 10 years younger than me. And then after our older brother passed away, we started talking every day, man. Or not every day, but like I think we did every day for a little while. But pretty much every week we make sure to talk. And yeah, he's doing great. Married, 2 kids. And they are like TLM Catholics, you know, they're the traditional folks. And I am very much a Novus Ordo. I've been to TL. Don't get me wrong. I've been to TLM Mass 4 or 5 times. I really like it. But my Protestant upbringing, I really appreciated. I really appreciate being able to relate the Bible. I know a lot of people think it's corny, but I love Christian rock music, and I love conventional hymns, and I love singing, and all of that stuff. I just feel like the Novus Ordo Mass, it's very similar to what I grew up with. It's not. It's really not all that different, except it does follow a liturgy and it follows the Catholic calendar for the year. Yeah. And so that's what I feel comfortable with, and I love it. And I've got a small community church that's, doing not doing great, but not doing that poorly. And we got a lot going on, and we got some strong relationships within that church community. So yeah.
And then that so many of the points that you talk about with like Peterson, like I do think that it was unique to our generation at this point, now that we're both 40, like what was going on almost a decade ago, like and now Gen Z is all broaching that same age. And, a lot of them don't like Peterson, or, there's a huge critique out there. And I just can't, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not going anywhere. Like something happened that was profoundly helpful. And it was those, it's funny you say that conversation between Paris and Peterson, because you said, well, no, Peterson's trying to share wisdom. And isn't wisdom a form of truth? It's almost like that Brett Weinstein, when he was on Rogan during that same time, and he said, like, well, where religion worked well enough because it's the same ideas of do porcupines quills shoot out? No, they don't scientifically. But if you believe that, you're probably going to be, that's how and I thought, well, that's actually really profound. That actually, in a sense, made a religious argument for me. I don't know, like in my mind, related to something like wisdom. And so Peterson saying things like that. And definitely the power of who do you want? I think when you're 30-ish and someone says, who do you want to be at your father's funeral? That goes so, what kind of man do you want to be at your father's funeral? I think that goes so deep to the heart of a man. And there was just nothing, talk about Vervaeke's talking about the wisdom famine. Those weren't the kind of, because there was also, obviously the political layer, and it's dealing with gender, and it's dealing with, these things. So he he shoves through that, and you get down to the meaning layer, and he's saying things to kind of what, all these YouTube guys are watching, these men. But, but the biggest voices in American pop culture that, like my father-in-law would say something along the lines of like, the Homer Simpsoning of men in America, starting from the early 90s. Like that's the God of Set message generally. I mean, there's moments, you could make arguments for different things, but to have someone say something that direct, that makes so much sense. Those kind of, when you're kind of at a point, like you're saying, in those your point of lowest estate. I mean, I have critiques of Christianity, even in the time of being completely in it and surrounded by it and all in it. And I feel like in my situation, there wasn't that. I don't know how else to say, but it didn't feel like there was that much. There was like, here's charisma, here's the opposite of historical criticism or something, but there's not that voice. And that made sense when you're in low estate. I don't know. And and he's not a perfect person, and he probably is a hypocrite, just like you or me at the times. And that's disappointing, I think, to a lot of people. But I don't know, that's what I heard. And I don't know, that I just to reflect back some of that, what was profound during that time.
I suspect.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I suspect that men and women who had good male role models and authority figures were more able to respond well to Peterson.
Mm.
Because the most common criticism that's leveled at Peterson is, I don't like how he says things. I don't like how he talks, or the tone of voice, or this or that. And because he's not gentle in how he'll describe his temperament as pretty high in trait neuroticism, like he's
Yep.
pretty susceptible to negative emotion. But the way he speaks is like with a hammer. He's forceful. He's not gentle. And I suspect for those of us that had good men in our lives that talk that way, and my father, is like that. He's gruff, he's rough around the edges, but he knows what he's talking about. He was a good father. And so that abrasiveness never bothered me. And so on one hand, I think to myself, oh, I wish, Peterson could have captured more people with, but on the other hand, like you were saying, I think he really was a once in a generation voice. And I don't feel like there was the equivalent on the female side. I'm trying to think if there's any like female voice that's like a call to virtue or something like that. I can't really think of one. And the same goes for Gen Z now. It's like, I'm trying to think of like, who's the Gen Z voice, calling for virtuous, self-sacrificial men. And yeah, so I really think he was a once in a lifetime thing. And I think he will be remembered for that Genesis series. But I think more importantly, I think what he'll really be remembered for is the legacy of what he started. And I think TLC is maybe the single most important factor of it. I've had this discussion with Chad about, like, isn't it good that Peterson, I'm sort of showing my bias here, but I'm very glad that Peterson is not directly involved in TLC, he might be aware of it and he might deliberately be avoiding it. But I just think it's good. It's good in the same way that Paul VanderKlay, PVK, has not directly tried to steer the ship, but has just sort of guided the spirit and pointed. Been more of like a pointing role, saying, "Hey, look at that star. We should probably go in that direction." Whatever that star is. Yeah. And so
Stars.
Yeah. No, go ahead. What was
North
it?
Stars. And to the point on like women voices, because I think we are seeing now, I mean, even just I don't know if it's that NBC poll that came out about like what are Gen Z women's highest priorities, and it was like work identity. And I think Mary Harrington is just like, I don't know if you've watched some of her stuff with Paul Kingsnorth, but she seems to be
with a hammer.
yeah, like she's kind of like is kind of taking that, and she's coming from a milieu similar to Peterson's Canada, being in the UK with what's going on over there right now too. So I think that there's some intensities, and so I don't know, that's kind of a thought that I had when you were talking about that. And yeah, so like, I mean, the corner, like you said, you care deeply. That's so evident in even, I don't know all the planning connectedness you had for Midwest Estuary, but I know you were involved and you've been a huge support to Chad, and it was Chad's an encouragement and a friend to Chad. And it's been his, that was, I guess, his initial seed of an idea. I don't know, like connect. This is what I say about the Peterson thing related to the corner is there's this massive political layer. When I went to Symbolic World, that week, Peterson spoke in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I just like after work one day, I just decided to go that night. And then I knew I was going to go to Symbolic World Summit later that week. And I'm pretty sure I knew that he was going to be there because Peugeot said our special guest like the week of or something. And so I went and I sat in a room full of 10,000 people, saw some people I knew, and he made like 3 political jokes the whole time. And the rest of it was, biblical sacrifice. The rest of it was like the Q&A was about marriage and family and all this stuff. And I walk out and I hear like some guys, young men being like, oh, did you hear that? He made that like what they gripped were his least important points being made in that. And so, and when I would try to explain this, say to like my wife or something, I was like, no, there's a layer. There's like the meaning layer. The maps of meaning layer is beneath the political layer. And I feel like that's really where the seed, and if VanderKlay is cultivating something, that to me is in reference to what you're talking about, is cultivating that point in which that thing that he was putting out there. So.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about the younger generation being political. I think the political activism of the 2010s, especially in conjunction with social media, I think where it really started, at least in my mind, where it really began to crystallize is with social media, was with Trayvon Martin in 2012. Yep. I think it's where it really started.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Peterson talks about the left actually being more early adopters of technology and just more open, generally speaking. And so the left kind of rode that wave of, we can use, it is a gift. Look at we can use this for good, and quoting Boromir there with the anyway, and they rode that for a few years, and then you get, I think, the Tea Party. There's always been this even when I was a kid, there's always been this both on left and right, there's been this big distrust of government and institutions and top-down rules, and America, the United States, really does have that rugged masculine streak, for lack of a better descriptor, where it's like, don't come on my property, don't tread on me, like that's really there. And it's there on both sides. It was there with Rage Against the Machine in the 90s and Occupy Wall Street, and it was there with the Tea Party, and it's always been there. And then something happened where I think what corporate America realized is, with social media, like, they could earn more profits by being on the side of history, so to speak. And I think a pivot happened where the left, like in the 90s, the left was very much against NAFTA and big government and all that. And the pivot happened somewhere between there and the 2010s, where no, we need all these factions all together in the same group, because then we could make change happen, whatever change meant. And it pivoted from, let's say, distrust of economic systems to distrust of identity groups, whatever, that the identity groups, whatever they may be. And I think seeing, and so you gotta think of Gen Z as being like raised in that milieu of the 2012 to 2020, and seeing how that social media power was wielded, for better or for worse. And then Gen Z is like, we could use this too. But like, and so, because it was extremely powerful. It was a spirit that went through every major institution. Unless you were an institution that was like flat out arrayed against it. Like I'm thinking something like Liberty University or Daily Wire. Like, you know, like these are not powerful institutions.
They were small, independent things. Yeah.
Yeah. But it went through everywhere. So yeah, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. And so I do worry about that. It's where's the redemption? Where's the forgiveness of this new religion? Where is the turning the other cheek? Where is the manly capacity to say, I can take it, but I'm not going to respond in kind? You know, where's this guy? Where's that? Right there.
Man. Yeah. One of the things, and you brought this into I didn't finish the whole thing, but you brought it into President Foxman, and then you brought it up on Paul's live stream, like directly after Midwest Estuary. And I had said this when I'm listening to the guys up there, I kind of had this intuition. I was like, well, what do you think Gen Z thinks about this? Because like you just pointing at them being completely baked in it in a way that nobody else has. And you and me at this kind of turning point where we were the first really like that captured social media, I don't know what you would call, there's something else, algorithmic, like you saying, like but also like, when Facebook first started and it's like, there's, college group of Republicans, college group of Democrats, and they're having, it's like college students having debate inside of, no one cares, because it's just like nothing. And it happens so fast. And if you talk to some of the younger guys, they were like, well, we started seeing like this kind of authoritarian spirit clamp down into like a Reddit, and then like other like deeper spaces, 4chan and all. There's like all this stuff that was happening that I wasn't aware of. I was like you. For me, the spirit that captured me was that seedbed of the BLM thing that you kind of poked out with Trayvon Martin. And we saw there was just like, it just like kept getting hammered, and you just like every time you're like, so yeah, what you said that was one of the biggest things for you at TLC was like really contemplating, I'd say TLC at Midwest Estuary, that was really contemplating Gen Z, I guess. If you wanted to share some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So many different ways I could start unpacking that. Agent arena relationships. I was raised in video games. Video games were a cornerstone of who I was. The video games were the thing I look forward to the most. And it's really the story, it's really the story of diving into something. And it took me a while to figure out why video games were and are so salient. And I'll get to the Gen Z thing.
I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah. But okay, if you think of young men entering the world is immensely complicated. You're on the bottom rung of the dominance hierarchy, the status hierarchy, call it whatever you will. You've got very little skills, very few talents, and you're in this immensely complicated system. Now, what a video game is a reduced complexity system that is a simulacrum of reality in some way, shape, or form. It has to be a simulacrum of reality, or else it wouldn't play. Like, it has to have rules that make sense toward a goal. And so if you think of that as like, oh, I'm attracted to learning how a system works that's a smaller subset of like the world system or life or whatever it is, and then I can master those rules, and I can get really good at climbing this dominance hierarchy or this status hierarchy within this game world. And then if you can get good at that across different video games, it's like, okay, all the things, the meta game of how all the systems work across these video games, and I can get good at immediately ascending the ladder of awesomeness on this. And then of course it spurs the imagination and possibilities and all that amazing stuff. So it's combination of like combining what could be with, and it's easier obviously because you can become like a a super dangerous assassin in a game within like 2 hours, and to become a super dangerous assassin in real life probably take like 8 years of training. So yeah, it's like way easier to do it in the game world. Okay. So yeah, and you get to the meta status of doing all that. But then, so that's thinking about it from an agent of like, okay, I'm basically going to embrace via faith. I'm going to embrace this game world as worthy of playing, like, or in life terms, I'm going to presume that my existence in this thing we call life is good and worth playing. I'm going to play the game. That's axiomatic presumption. So in playing a video game, you have to make that jump and say, I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna do it. And you can make that jump because you've heard about it online. Your friends are talking about that game. You know that somebody somewhere is encouraged you. You're like, oh yeah, I'm missing out. I want to get into this experience. And you make that leap of faith. But then what's happened, and this has happened steadily over the last like 10 to 15 years, I would say, is, you know, when it first started, I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, this makes no sense. It was the rise of Twitch and the rise of streaming, where people are watching other people play the video game. And I couldn't understand that because I was like, wait, you're spoiling the experience of like playing the game yourself. Like, instead of like living life, you're watching reality TV of someone else live life, and that's your life of like
they're only
watching someone else.
But they're only living a simulacrum of living life.
Correct. So it's like
third degree.
Yeah. So it's like the whole point of the video game is like you get to explore for your own experience, like how you can interact and see it and do it. And but then the video game streaming kept getting more popular. And actually, like, video games, generally speaking, they're still, don't get me wrong, they're still extremely popular. But like the ratio of how many people like watch people play video games versus like actually play them has tilted more in the watching direction. And then you can also think about that in terms of social media, or not even social media. So you go from like a 2-hour video to a 20-minute video. Catholic Mass, they encourage keep your sermons under like 7 minutes or something, or 15 minutes. I don't know what, you go shorter and shorter, and we get down to Vine. Okay, 8 seconds, 4 seconds, 2 seconds. Yeah, you get down to like, I'm going to coin this. Actually, this is my term, so people can use it, but they have to credit me. It's called T, the temptation of the easy alternative, whatever it is, the temptation of the easy alternative. So that you got the easier and easier alternative that's simpler. And so at some point, so here's what I think happens at some point is like you hit a point of it's almost like a phase shift where water turns to ice or something like that. And you hit a point in that where your thinking is that, no, well, the problem is not me as an agent. The problem is the system, because what I'm participating in is less and less meaningful, less and less substantive, less and less useful, because there has to be a diminishing return as you trade off depth for speed or efficiency, whatever it is. There's sort of a diminishing efficacy, and then at some point you hit a point where the conclusion is like, okay, I as the agent, the right answer is not I as an agent to valiantly go forth and face the dragon. The answer is like, the arena is wrong. Like, the arena is the problem, and we need to adjust the arena. And the way you adjust the arena in a democratic system is via politics. And the way you adjust politics is through influence, memes, and all that stuff. And I think that's somewhat of the tipping point, is that I think there are other things going on. So if you can give me another like 2 or 3 minutes to unpack a theory I have. Okay. So I think this bothers a lot of people, what I'm about to say, but I think it's generally true. And I'm not actually a doomer. in what I'm about to say.
I know you're an optimist.
I'm an optimist, and I'm a faith-filled optimist. But I think what allows me to be that is Christ, for lack of a, I mean, that's it. That's what faith is for. I think we are coming towards the end of what I'll call the era of progress, or okay, so every generation, there's this idea that like people just will automatically graduate college and find jobs and find meaningful employment and all that. And I think something that's left out of the equation is that most of the jobs available to, or sorry, most of like the high status jobs, I should say, that are available to like 20 somethings that are just coming out of college and starting their career, most of the high status jobs are in burgeoning industries that are just getting started. So you could think of like post World War II, got a lot of U.S. manufacturing that's like booming, cars, and because everything's pivoting from tanks to cars, or all this, and so there's all these like new industries that are now fueling the world versus just like American industry prior to World War II. And then you get up to like the 50s and 60s where you have all this home, basically like home appliance creation, and the U.S. highway system gets built, and it's just U.S. is booming with all this building and all these creations, and then so there's all these new jobs being created for that manufacturing, and but then the 70s hit, and there's oil shock and all that, but the 70s, I think, we're kind of a lull in that before the 80s, where like, so everybody graduating college in the early 80s who was like somewhat savvy technically in any capacity, they would go get jobs at IBM and Apple, and all these, Microsoft was starting, and all these tech companies that were just getting started,
or even in the industrial ones that were needing more tech, like back into them.
Yeah. So on one hand, the conventional wisdom is like Reagan and Volcker induced a recession, and that got us out of the inflation of the early 80s, and then Reagan kind of saved the day. And I think there's a lot of, I think that is true. I think that is true. But I think the other thing that saved the day is that you had a genuine burgeoning industry in the United States that really took off. And so all the really smart talent graduating in the late 70s and early 80s that industry was just getting off the ground, and it's never like the 40 and 50-year-old established people in their career that go into that. It's always the young kids that are getting pulled into, young, capable, adept, or I shouldn't say capable. They're not capable yet. They have a lot of potential, a lot of learning to do. They get sucked in, and then they get pulled up as the industry of that industry grows. And then it happened again in the 90s with the internet. And then in the 2000s, it even happened with, or late 2000s, with like social media and all these, and the smartphones. And now everyone develops an app, and there's a huge market for. So you have these waves where people are graduating college, and then you have these burgeoning industries that's where I think the real new positive job creation and opportunities are, is like when a brand new industry is opened and created. And the only new industry that's happened in the last like 8 years really is AI. And the reality, or the LLMs, or artificial general intelligence, whatever you want to call that. But the reality of that is that for those that are like in the upper echelon of like the theoretical stuff, they're being recruited for like $1 million a year, like ridiculous. But for most other highly capable, like high status positions, they're actually eliminating a lot of the simpler entry level work because it can now be automated, and there's these automatic assistants. So there's basically this gap in the generation that's graduating in the last 8 years, and the gap is something like, eventually we're going to need skilled people to replace the people who are going to be retiring in the coming years and decades. But in the meantime, we're going to save money. We're going to cut costs by not having to hire as many people, because the LLMs are able to, or the agents or whatever, are able to automate the simpler tasks. And so this generation is like, Like we're not yet in a recession, but this generation is caught in like a weird place where the high status there's less high status work because the major innovation of this generation is to like reduce the need for that work. It's not actually like a brand new service that people are, because when you think of like LLMs, it's not any different than like what a search engine would do or what other services would do. It's basically a simulacrum of like asking someone who's knowledgeable, or it's simulacrum of using a search engine. Or so it's not actually creating any net new value so much as it's shortening the latency. Like it allows you to reach a goal faster, but the price of that is a trade-off in quality. Not always, but
A certain
that's
type of quality, at least
yeah.
human quality.
Yeah,
and whether that quality is more efficient or more effective, even, it's still a quality of humanity, I guess. I don't know if that's so.
Yeah, well,
they're looking. So that's what Gen Z is looking at. That's what they're intuiting or feeling, is kind of what, you know.
like,
and so
like
the end of progress.
yeah, I would guess I would say like, what is the big industry that capable, enthusiastic Gen Zers are able to go into and build a career, build a future, build a, like, what is that industry? You know, that an industry that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, we both have kids, so it's kind of some, you know, it. I do think it's, sometimes I have anxieties about those types of things, but the other thing is I do think it creates a value for humanity in a certain way that we haven't felt in a long time. And that may be where some of the opportunity exists, is offering humanity, I guess you could say. I don't know. That's kind of how I've thought about it, whether that's a type of labor or a type, you know, something like, yeah, there's already, you know, you could pull up your AI right now and get a fairly astute answers for therapeutic mental questions. And at some point, is that enough for you? Or do you feel like you need another human to talk to related to those things? You know, and so kind of wonder, I think, man, yeah. So, I mean, that's yeah, the end of progress. I've talked to a couple of people thinking, I think that everything's going to flip back to all these little small, like kind of the Jordan Hall thing, you know, and I'm biased because I'm from a small town, but I do think there's something to the relationship with cities and the relationship with humans and the relationship with the earth, even like that. There's going to be something as a response to the lack of the necessity for our value to be in work in a certain kind of way that it used to be. That even the water cooler was something that was human in a way, you know, in that version of small talk. And like when that goes away. So, because like if you're just working in your house, you don't get the water cooler even, you know. You may know that. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I because post-COVID, I work from home, and you know, my church has been absolutely essential. Not just my church, but luckily my wife's extended family. We usually have dinner multiple times a week, but I have people in my day-to-day life, like physically every single week, not necessarily every single day, but most days and every single week, definitely. Where that's been the sanity keeper, you know. So
yeah. Well, I want to go back to something way earlier into your story, and because I brought this up in the intro, and it's kind of been on my mind recently. But you have that experience. You have this. I mean, you have an image that represents like an archetypal truth related to even scripture, as like, what is the voice of God? You'll know. You know, like it comes from this image from that show. But obviously, like you said, the Catholicity or the religious imagery comes up through Babylon 5, through its director, and these things like, and I know you've talked about that you've read some of his stuff, like the Red Book or something. I read an autobiography or no, a biography, short biography of him, probably 2018, 2017, related to all this, you know, related to how much Peterson was, you know, is a Jungian in his own right? And so it's like, how did that play into your story and this and your journey to related to such things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Early on in my journey, in 2017, even post that experience in the Catholic Church, and even after I felt like I was meant to be Catholic, or I am meant to be the Roman Catholic, Jung played a absolutely paramount role in my life. Like at that time, I regarded Jung only second to Christ. You know, it was almost like the twin pillars of how I was thinking about things. Because I had a dream on New Year's Eve of 2017 into 2018 that was like one of these like ultra vivid, every detail matters type dreams. And I was already starting to read Jung's autobiography at that time, and I had that dream, and I I woke up New Year's Eve 2018, and I was thinking about that dream, and I was like, well, you know, one question is always like, how do you know when your interpretation of a dream is accurate? Well, what happened to me is I was laying in bed thinking about that dream for about 10 minutes, and then I hit a certain interpretation of it. And when I hit that interpretation of the dream, my heart sank.
Ooh.
And it's involuntary. It's an involuntary response to hitting a certain interpretation. And when that involuntary response hit, then I knew I had the right interpretation. And so that's what I would say to someone who is trying to interpret a dream or something like that. When you have an involuntary response, often negative, that probably means it's correct. You know, there's something under the surface there that's worth investigating and unpacking. And one feature that's been really essential in my journey is resentment. I am extremely grateful for resentment. That's maybe strange, but I see so much resentment today from all sides, and I see resentment only rising and rising and rising, and that's probably the most worrisome sign in my mind. And the advice I will give to anyone who's consumed by resentment. So Peterson talked about this. He said, you know, if you're resentful, it's one of two things. Either A, you're being taken advantage of, or B, you're a spoiled brat child and you need to grow up. And I was very much in the second camp. There's probably 10% of me that was in the first camp, and there's 90% that needed to be burned away. And what was so I'm so grateful I did this. But I started a journal, and I started just writing. Like I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I have like maybe 1,000 pages of it's a man diary. It's a man journal. I have probably 1,000 pages of a journal for like 3 or 4 years. Like a very, you know, I probably wrote on average like a page or two a day. And I look back on it now, and it's just like most of it's just vile, like absolute like garbage, resentful bullshit. But amidst all the garbage, there's like these glitters of gold and an insight. You know, it's not all. And eventually, I'll probably go through all of it and like try to sort out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And it was also the other thing that I noticed is that during those really difficult times, they tend to be really creative times. Like if you lean into it, if you're in a very dark place, so that writing did yield fruit. Like I don't have in a more stable emotional state, I don't have the same level of creativity that I did in that darkness. So my advice is like for anyone who's going through that, like don't try to analyze it, don't try to fix it, just get it out. Like get it out in such a way that it does not adversely impact the people in your life that you love. And so and that's the purpose of art. The whole purpose of art, the whole thing is to reveal things about yourself without it being stuck within yourself, and be able to see yourself like a mirror, be able to see, oh, that's who I am, and our ability to abstract and see that. And but when I say see yourself, I mean that at multiple layers. Like it's yourself, but then it's also the layer of your family, it's the layer of your church, it's the layer. So all the art at all those layers allows you to see yourself at that layer, you could say, and then come together or acknowledge your sins, or figure out what's right and what's wrong about whatever it is at that layer. And that's a process that takes years. And that's what Jung calls the individuation process. I'm seriously convinced that just writing every day about what, honestly, do not be afraid of your honest fears, honest anger, like just writing about it, your raw honesty, even if you're scared of just how rough and brutal you are within yourself. That's your shadow. I mean, that's the dark Jungian side of yourself. Like, even if you're scared of it, just write it, like get it out. And the more you get it out, the less it's going to own you. Like the more, and that's the same thing with confessions. Like the more you can voluntarily confess it. And a good start is just to write, And yeah, so where else to go with that? I mean, that's the
so much. Yeah. I mean, there's so much about getting out what is inside. Mm-hmm. And I think that, obviously psychology deals with this. Obviously Christianity deals with this. And that's kind of where I want to go with that a little bit. But just to say, materialism doesn't deal with that idea of soul or psyche. It doesn't really. And so you don't know or believe that there is like truth that needs to be confessed. It's just, you're not dealing or wrestling or those types of things. And I think that's really important. I haven't been much of a writer or journaler, on and off. I have. And I do think that usually I do lean into that space when I am more down, or whatever word you want to ascribe to pain and or suffering or a dark type place. And then, like you said, you just tied it straight to confession. And I think that I totally agree. And it's interesting. The relationship between confession and modern therapy is a very interesting relationship, and why, even with what Peterson, the fact that he was a psychologist and all of this related to, and it's coming from his very Jungian, which I thought that Vervaeke's insight to that at North Midwest Estuary was just very, when he said that Peterson's, I don't know, he didn't use the word devotion, but his, I can't remember the exact word he used, but it was, his allegiance to Jung creates a type of, I can't remember if his word was apathy towards a confessed faith, I guess you could say, or a theistic allegiance or something. But what, having my own experience with like a kind of archetypal vision of something, and like evaluating that in truth, there mentioned earlier, there wasn't a lot of conversation to be had around that kind of relationship to my faith in kind of the broader evangelical world. And so I was like, symbolic world, like symbols. What is this? Like, these things started to help me wrestle with that. And even, like I said, I was like drawn to reading a little bit about Jung. And even though I think that there's divorced from an actual Christianity, it probably is a little dangerous, because this, one of the things that we talk about in the corner, especially shout out to Luke Thompson, but is the difference between a person and an individual. And I'm interested in what your thoughts are relating to like that idea of individualization, because I kind of wrestle with those ideas a little bit. So I'm curious how you've maybe thought about that, if you have.
I think Jung is a great starting point for breaking the physical materialist frame. So I'll try to come at this from like a evolutionary physical materialist frame, because I think it makes perfect sense. So you have to assume in an evolutionary frame that every part of you that exists, both physical and immaterial, you know, things like your drives, your motives, your feelings, all of that is there for an evolutionary reason. Like otherwise it would have been weeded out. Like it was something that at the very least, it helped in ensuring your ancestors survived in some way, shape, or form. And that's something, you know, that bottom up kind of assumption that things are there for good reason, even if it's only from like a survival standpoint. That's a starting point. That's like, okay, so, and then getting clues into who you are based on that, based on those aspects. I think there's a lot of pride that can then enter into that. I do see pride as the one thing that became clear to me over time is like, yeah, I totally agree that pride is the most powerful sin. Like every sin is related to pride in some way, shape, or form. And the reason I say that is like, well let me start with a personal example. And so in psychological literature, this is called an elation, which is like, oh, I was hit with this wonderful experience and I have the wisdom and the truth and I have to share it with the world and all this stuff. And I remember a scene in the movie The Truman Show where he stands up as a kid. He's in school as a kid and he stands up and he's like, I want to be an explorer. And the teacher pulls down the map and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. There's nothing left to explore. And in my elation post religious experience, post Jung, in my elation, I was like, oh, there is something that's left to explore. It's the interior world. It's the inside. You know, I can explore the depths of my psyche and I can get to know all of that stuff, and no one else can see it except me, and it's mine and it's my precious, and you know, all that fun stuff. And yeah, so that's a lot of the temptation of like, oh, I have the true gold and it's very deep and it's, you know, and but yet that's not the reality of our experience. You know, the reality of our experience, well, we have our sleeping time, certainly, but the reality of our experience is like the physical world, physical hardship, other people. We have to somehow interact with those other people. And I think any conception of reality that doesn't take the individual as an agent for others, or as an agent in this broader, as an agent for something above and beyond itself, not below itself, is mistaken. I think it's because I've had this conception of hell, and I think this is not that far off from where we're headed to. So imagine that I can give you, Christian Baxter, access to whatever you want at any time of day. It's just a click away. You want some sort of food, I can get that delivered to you just like that within minutes. You need a special kind of entertainment, it's instant, right to your door. So everything that you personally want and need, everything that your heart can desire, is signed, sealed, delivered, expressed directly to you whenever you want it. So you have, for lack of a better word, in that scenario, you would have a genie in the lamp with unlimited wishes. And then the question is like, why bother interacting with any other human being in that world? Because another human being will not perfectly give me what I desire from that human being at this moment in time. You will not ask me the exact question as an interviewer that I want you to ask, such that I can give you the perfect 110% response.
Yeah.
Because so I should just talk to an AI that can pre-programmatically give me the exact questions that I want in order to make me look as good as possible on the My Truly podcast. That's what I really need. Right?
Yeah.
And so like,
That's
why bother interacting with any other person? Seriously, why? If I could tell you, like, no, you will have everything you need till the end of time, and you will be, but that's all you get. That's it. It's so hell is the situation where you are actually trapped by just your imagination and nothing beyond it. Meaning hell is the certainty that your frame is right. That's hell. Because then whatever is generated within the confines of whatever your frame is. Yeah. So if that's the reality, then I guess your frame can be broken by things that happen within. But then you can also think of every interaction with every other human being who's not you as a potential for wisdom, grace, courage, something beyond what's possible in your frame, because something can happen that's unexpected and takes you by surprise and leads you to other possibilities. It's the placement of, and the delving into the unconsciousness places you at the center of it as like, okay, I'm going to be the arbiter. I'm going to decide. And the outward journey is saying, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to mess. I need you, Lord, I need you. Like everything I do, like, help me. Like, it's not me, it's you. And I know that seems like a trivial difference. That seems like an absolutely trivial difference. Like, oh, you got a voice within you telling you that I'm God and I'm guiding you. And it's like, a quote Peugeot, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's the reality of the Christian life. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not you, because the things that are presented to you somehow are beyond the things that you previously could imagine, or beyond the things that you previously thought were possible. I think what's missing in this political hyper focus is a concept of grace, that the things that you want, the greatest, deepest desires of your heart, that they themselves could change, and that they should change. And that's the whole purpose of life, is to be changed. And the focus and the allowance of yourself to be changed toward the highest, looking up versus down. And I don't know why I went the more, toward Christ route versus towards Jung. I suspect it's just more interesting. I don't want to give myself too much credit. It's just like the depths of me are not as interesting as the world of what Christ can present.
Interesting. Yeah. So like if you like that I mean, part of what you said is that it sounds like, I mean, you can correct me, but the journey, obviously, even saying it out loud, the journey inward is a ultimate path to, if it's ultimate, it's a path to hell. And, and I think I can definitely, even in my own experiences, like, yeah, that's right. Because it is selfish, or it is prideful. If you stay there, is there need at time to explore, like you were saying, and get these things out, for evaluation, for apology, for even to say something you believe is true, like, I mean, yeah, I do, but it is kind of a, yeah, that's helpful, actually. Just, I appreciate that. One thing you were saying backstage was kind of saying, like, since we both kind of came into the corner, you feel like we did different things at different times. What unpack that some a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think you were this, like, you came in with like a clear direction, purpose, channel, like sharing your story, sharing all of that stuff, and also bringing in a lot of new voices. I think the thing that you've been remarkably good at is bringing stuff into the corner for consideration. I remember, I think you had like the first Jordan Hall interview.
Me and Sam's came out at the same day, but
Same day. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was just one example, but like a lot of people, and not even, and especially some of the randos that are really interesting. And then, so I see you as sort of, one of these kind of psychopomp intermediary figures that like guide people in and out of, you make people outside of TLC more aware of TLC, but also making people within TLC more aware of people, of things and ideas and people that are, so you are an intermediary. And I do see you as like kind of the closest equivalent, the mantle of Paul, as Paul VanderKlay has gone up in prominence and he's able to do fewer randos. You've taken on that mantle, and that's a really important role. And I did not want as much responsibility coming in. Like I came in for more selfish reasons, and
mine can be selfish too.
okay, we can both be selfish. Because so actually this was me channeling Carl Jung when I started doing things in my local Catholic church. But when I started doing things in my local church, I made a deal with myself where I'm like, okay, when I was a kid, like helping out in the food pantry or the soup kitchen or whatever, I hated that stuff. I was like, Peterson, maybe it's Jung too, but Peterson is like, don't pretend to be more virtuous than you actually are. Don't pretend to be better than you actually are. And that stuck with me. I think that might be Carl Jung also. I don't remember who I got that from, but that really did stick with me. So joining my church, I was like, okay, I can't participate in ministries or activities that like I don't genuinely want to participate in. Because if I don't actually want to be there, then I'm secretly like harboring this resentment toward God. It's like, oh, I have to do this dumb thing again. And it's okay if like occasionally I'm not in the mood for something and I still do it. I get that. But like generally speaking, my heart really has to be in it. And so I participate in a Bible study for my church that I really, really enjoy. And I participate in music ministry, and there are some other things too. Like my wife's aunt invited me to 1 hour Eucharistic adoration every Friday, where you just sit and you stare at the Lord and you meditate. And I started doing like a weekly exam, and like I would go through all the roles in my life. How am I doing as a father? How am I doing as a husband? How am I doing in my job? How am I doing? And I would do that weekly, and I would pray when I really needed help. And well, I would pray all the time, but like I would really ask God when I really needed help. But that was life-saving, maybe. I don't know, but it was really, really good. Anyway, so like I told myself I wasn't gonna do the things that I genuinely didn't want to do. And with TLC, it's like I saw individual people that were in this space, and I was like, I'm still kind of lonely in that, like, I couldn't talk to people in my local church about these ideas and these things that I was like, I had journaled for that point for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten all this bile out, and I was way less resentful. And I was like, okay, man, now that I'm way less resentful, like maybe it's a good time to actually like talk more publicly, because now I'm not as tempted to like spill out my bile onto the rest of the world, so to speak. And then there's that parable that Jesus tells. So it's like, when you're invited to the wedding banquet, like don't sit up in front. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna come out. And then Chad, the alcoholic at the time. So Chad's still the alcoholic. But anyway, so Chad started asking for rando discussions. And I was like, I got to do it. So I was Chad's first rando. I was so excited. And I told my story. And the very first time I talked to Chad on the phone, this is going to sound crazy, but the very first time I said to him, I actually said this. I said, I think we're meant to be best friends. The very first time I talked to him on the phone. And then here we are 2 years later. And he called me this morning. I couldn't answer because because I got you. But I got you, babe.
We're on a group. We're now on a group chat together with him. He popped a big one out there.
Yeah.
Big old group chat. So, I mean, that's it. So are you saying like getting into the corner? You said like, I didn't want to take that kind of responsibility. I don't know. When you say I had like a clear, I don't think I was in one of those places you were talking about it, where this thing was kind of bubbling for me in it. And I actually didn't realize it at the time, because talk about simulacrums of creativity, mention modern, contemporary Christian worship music and stuff. Well, when you're covering music all the time and people are telling you that you're creative, but you're covering, it just does weird things to your brain. And, there could be counter arguments to all that, but I kind of had this, I didn't have an identity as a creative person, which was so weird for people to look at me and think, oh, he's obviously creative, but I didn't feel that way. And so it was like, I'm just going to let go. And so many of the lessons, like looking at Grim and Chad, like if I had tried to make the perfect podcast, I would have quit after like one or two. Edit, I'd hear Paul be like, I don't edit, and like, yeah, I have a nice-ish camera, for the corner, but like, it's like, oh, they're just going, they're just doing, they're just playing. Just play, Christian. And that was the spirit in which I just decided that was how, and I'm going to pretend to be a podcaster, and I'm going to, like, so those, I was just looking at those, like when Paul says, these are my lieutenants, and I'm like, okay, what are they doing? And again, like I can't go all the way there. Like you were saying, I'm kind of this, man, it's so funny because that was, the whole psychopomp thing that Vervaeke brought up between his conversation with Peterson like last year. And I was kind of like, oh, and then you just called me one. I'm like, oh, that's a little weird. But yeah, I mean, that was
spiritual midwife.
Spiritual. What did he look like? Oh, what did Hermes look like? Oh man. Yeah. And then, but you also came in, like, I mean, I thought, like you were saying, you came in with a pretty distinct, like, fringe, and that's been noted. Like, okay, my purpose and my aim is to develop friendship here. And you went about doing that. And that wasn't actually, my initial thing, was friendship was cultivated, but it was a little bit more like you're saying, like, I'm kind of trying to build something because that's a natural, well, I'd spent a long time not building when that was a very natural thing for me to want to do on purpose. And so, that was like, okay, I'm going to be okay with doing this again in a way, and so not how I used to do it, but, and earlier in the conversation you were mentioning, well, even in the genie illustration, and we had this conversation, liquid modernity with this zillennial conversation I had. There was about friction and stuff, but the temptation to make clickbait or to make more palatable or more viral type things, like if you're aiming at 2-hour conversations, that's not the path. And so it is its own kind of, that to me is kind of like a friction full path that's, I think, important, related to all, like you said, when you're like getting everything down. And you do use these little AI shorts to try to point people back to the conversation, whatever. But yeah, different approaches. But I mean, but I've seen you, like, I'm kind of curious actually for you. I was thinking, after the conference and seeing you like Fox, I was like, maybe Neil's going to do his own thing. I don't know. Is that something that's kind of going on for you a little bit? I don't know. You tell me.
Well, if it fails, then there's no need to talk about it. And if it succeeds, then
well, there you go.
Then it'll be there. And yeah, so give me about 6 months. We'll see where we're at. If you want to do this again. Yeah.
That's a good, I mean, yeah, I think that's good. Well, what was your take, kind of go back to the conference, kind of give a little, I don't know, highs and lows at this point, now that the kind of the adrenaline, like you said, when we first get started, like the adrenaline or some of that stuff's kind of starting to, we're all kind of breathing a little bit, but it was like, whoa, what are you feeling right now? Related.
I mean, just a sense that we are in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And just to go back to kind of weave together a couple of things that you've said. One is that temptation to make something that's just more clickbaity, just to get attention, the attention economy. And the other one is my, when I was saying the temptation of the easier alternative, where it just, it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and everything gets more and more refined sugar, like the immediate gratification over the hard long-term thing. And I think that's what the TLC is doing as a whole, is the counterculture opposite of that. And that's actually something I realized about my attraction to Chad after the fact. Like it took me months to figure this out, but I'm like, okay, most YouTube channels, it's like this slick, polished production where it's just, oh, it's so beautiful. You fall in love with, oh, he's so charismatic, all this stuff. And then Chad's wearing this like Nacho Libre mask where the branding is indecipherable, completely incoherent at first glance. It's not, by the way, but at first glance it is. And it's unpolished, and the audio quality sometimes gets messed up, and all this stuff. But then under the surface, you get to know these people, and it just, the depth goes further up and further in. It's like all of these people, it's just bigger and bigger. It's bigger on the inside. And I was like, oh, I get it. It's like the anti-sales. It's like, the initial signals are stay away. This is just a completely dumb, pointless YouTube channel that's sending up all the signals that's like weird, bad, stay away. And then under the surface, it's like, hey man, if you're looking for something better, it's better over here. Like you're over there on Facebook or TikTok or whatever, or X, like, hey, it's better over here. Like, come on over. It's better. Like, come on over. Not you're trying to think of reasons not to, but like if you actually want better, it's here. Come on over. And most people say, oh, the reason that they don't want better, or oh, I've got everything I want, and that's the everything I wantness that I was just talking about. And so I love TLC because it's this secret that's hidden in plain sight. And the way, what gets you status here is a voluntary vulnerability. That's what gets you status.
And that comes straight from the rando culture. It's like but it also, I think what happens with that is that you actually, in the process, you recover an amount of agency through that process. And I think that's like I was like, crossing that threshold is really beautiful. And it was, I can't remember how long you said you were kind of paying attention to things before I still remember the first time I got on a stream. It was like Christian, what was his last name? He had the
Christian Golden.
Yes, Golden, and you and I were there, and Matt C was there, and Phlebas was there, and Matt Parlato was there, and and I remember, it's the same thing, but this was all happening in a month. Like I didn't know any of it existed. Really, even for the most part, before my first video, there was I saw a Paul VanderKlay live stream and I made a video. Like that was 10 people talking, and I was like, I recognize that. And I've been trying to have this conversation. I have no one to conversation with. And I think that me coming out, I was like, I almost came looking, I didn't come from within. I came looking at, and I just was looking at this whole thing. I was like, oh, what I felt like I thought I could see, oh, this is real. Like that was the thing. I was like, this is as real as anything. And then sometimes the conversation from within was like, is this real? I'm like looking at you like, yes, it is. That's what it felt like for me. And so maybe that, and then even the thing about polish and these, I built a studio and I was trying to do Instagram. So it was like, yeah, well, that's the full, I was trying to, not like crazy, but here's some, cover songs to go back to that whole creative conversation that we had. But but that is, I had to reckon with, and there was even I don't know if this is even saying it the right way, a hermeneutic of suspicion around the guy that had a studio. Like Grimm's like, he's definitely an agent. Like that was his first.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I was like, but there's
Agent Baxter.
Yeah, there's also a sense that what I was hoping is like, well, this is who I am. Like this is authenticity. I don't like, and that's weird in this space. It feels like this is like recognizing this whole evangelical technocratic thing that I had been involved in. I was like, born in this soup. And so that was definitely, I think that was a different flavor, but it was, trying to just be myself in that way. But it was someone says like, he's not doing this the right way. That was someone told me. Someone said that to me, that had been, I don't know, said or something. I was like, well, I don't know, but I think it's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you threaded this needle of doing the polished thing in a way that people appreciate, but still being vulnerable about trying to figure it out as you go along. And I think that's why, I describe Grimm as a wolf because he's sniffing around the border of TLC. What's the thing threatening the TLC? And he's sniffing and I think of myself more as a dog, so I can recognize the wolf when I see it. But the wolves never like dogs because they're always like, smaller, friendlier versions of themselves. And anyway, so you passed the smell test pretty quick because I think it's because there's a lot of people who throw like the TLC lingo around, and so long as TLC doesn't open any doors, then it's the minute that TLC becomes this brand that like, oh yeah, I went to Harvard, like I'm part of TLC, that the minute that shit happens, it's like that's a problem. So like and there's a lot of haters, and I'm grateful for the haters of the TLC because they sort of they're this counteracting force of the brand to be like, oh, maybe this brand isn't so good. I'm like, yes, it's not that great. Don't, like, it's an average internet community of average Christians doing average things in an okay way.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to see here, folks. Go home.
That's, it's an interesting thing about growth and in scale. And it has been able to maintain a posture towards growth versus the virality of scale, and I think that I don't know what's going to happen because there was quite a bit of like curiosity after Midwest Estuary, from some more peripheral, like I saw certain podcasts, that are like, oh, well, this is that they may, if they've been maybe in the last 2 years watching John Vervaeke, when people here have been for 4 or 5 years, and it's like, oh, well, there's a thing around, like those types of things start happening. Or obviously as Peugeot becomes more polished and professional, there is that question of what do you do with the good? How, and I don't think I'm agreeing with you because I don't think that, that was one of the things the Zillennials were like, oh, we should make a viral version of the corner. Or there was kind of like this, you heard it, like, or maybe you did. I don't know if you heard, but it was kind of there's this desire. And I attribute that to whatever that spirit actually is within something like evangelicalism. And I'm a little bit like, I bristle at it, even though I have, a nice camera, like, because it becomes more about scaling something than it becomes about what is happening within the persons and the relationships. And so I'm sensitive to that as well. And yeah, do I like to see like number go up engagement on a podcast or video? Yes. And I made the comment, and Paul gave me the correction, I said, yeah, something like, the amount of views being the amount of subscribers. I think that's, he goes, no, the number you need to pay attention to is comments. And I was like, oh yeah, that's better. And so, I mean, that's again, like his own version of friction and his own version of that. You know, I go back to something Alan said, and I think this really, Alan calls himself, you know, a name is an important thing. He calls himself a corner citizen.
He's the only corner citizen.
and and when he said, when Paul put out some, you know, should I keep doing randos? And he does. I think there's one that just came out, like a rando, but like he said, yes, if only for example, you know, and I was just like, yeah. Like, and I even heard Paul, I think it was the last video, not today's, but yesterday, he was like, people need to start doing more like not reaction, not his, you know, if you want to call what he does reaction videos, but more commentary videos. And he's like, a lot of people are doing conversations. And I thought, you know, that's, I actually went back and watched a few that I tried to do in, you know, a year, I mean, it's 6-9 months ago, but that's like a whole nother, yeah, that takes another level of work to like try to, you know, Grimm does that. He has that kind of thing, and it's not easy to do that. So, you know, I don't know, but those are definitely, I think those are great thoughts and great things about maybe some wisdom, like we were talking about seeing the intensities of aiming at scale versus like you have to be really intentional in a frictionless genie culture, like you said, to aim at growth versus that. And so I think that's really good.
Well, I think the problem is, I think that's where grace enters into the mix, because I don't think aiming at growth, it's like it's the way Peterson talks about happiness is the way you could talk about aiming for growth. Whereas if you aim for the best possible thing, that is a good thing. So for me, like what I actually aimed for, and I would say this is a phenomenal strategy, or maybe it just worked for me, but like I aimed for specific people that I wanted individual relationships with. And I've been able to do that. And it's been awesome, because then I don't have this like overarching responsibility, I feel like, to put out content or to, you know, do things that my heart's not into. But, you know, those individual people that I found, I don't know, there's something that glitters in the night of certain people, and that, you know, and I just like, there's gold here, you know, and I've trusted that instinct when I felt it or heard it. And it has served me well. And I think I was in a fraternity in college, a historical Jewish fraternity called ZBT, that was founded as a Zionist organization. So about half the members were Jewish and half were Gentile. And our catchphrase, I'm sure it's more controversial these days, but our catchphrase is Zion bemishpat tipodeh, which is Zion shall be redeemed with justice. And but that fraternity had, but that fraternity had everything from like Orthodox Jews to like, you know, never religious anarchists. One guy with a bad religion flag tattooed on his breast, you know, and everything in between. And we were, that was my first taste of like real brotherhood, like true misfits that somehow loved each other. And we had estuary type conversations as to like really heavy stuff. But when you're 19 or 20, and I recognized that spirit, that fraternal spirit in TLC, but it was bound up in a greater amount of virtue and faith. And I don't even mean faith in like a specific religion, but so much as like, there's an optimism in TLC, like amidst all the doom and gloom, there's an optimism that like, no, you know, we are meant to be here. We are on a good path. We are with friends, and we're going to figure this out, and we're going to get through it. And, you know, however you define God of your own understanding, God is with us. And yeah. And I told this to Ron Copperman last night. I said, like, my faith and who I am in relation to all the roles in my life, as a father, as a husband, et cetera, that is strengthened by being around and talking to and being with other Christians of similar, not necessarily even Christians, but people of strong virtue, and are calling me to higher moral character in whatever I'm doing, and serving as examples. And I want to be close knit with those people that are going to drag me kicking and screaming upward.
Mm. Well,
And that's, yeah.
I think that's a good way to end this, is be amongst a people that are dragging you kicking and screaming toward the highest. So, Neil, thanks for coming on and having a conversation today.
My pleasure, Christian.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.